Tonight, just like every other night, you are going to make yourself a promise. You are going to lie in bed, stare at the ceiling, and tell yourself that tomorrow is going to be different. Tomorrow, you will finally get serious. Tomorrow, you will wake up early, put down the phone, sit at your desk, and actually do the work that matters. You can already picture it. The alarm goes off at 6. You get up without hitting snooze. You make your coffee, open your laptop, and start crushing your to-do list like the disciplined, focused, high-performing version of yourself that you know exists somewhere deep inside. It feels so real in your head. It feels so certain. And for a brief moment, lying there in the dark, you genuinely believe it. But then tomorrow actually arrives. The alarm screams at 6. Your hand reaches for the phone, not to turn it off, but to scroll. Just a quick check. Just 5 minutes. But 5 minutes becomes 15. 15 becomes 45. And by the time you finally drag yourself out of bed, the morning energy is already gone. The coffee tastes bitter. The to-do list feels heavy. And that powerful, unstoppable version of you that felt so alive last night has already disappeared before the day even started. So you do what you always do. You push the important stuff to the afternoon. Then the afternoon feels too crowded, so you push it to the evening. Then the evening comes, and you are too tired, too drained, too mentally exhausted to even think about starting. So you tell yourself, fine, tomorrow, for sure. And the cycle begins again. But here is the part that nobody talks about. The most dangerous thing about procrastination is not the wasted time. It is not the missed deadlines. It is not even the guilt that sits in your stomach like a brick every single night. The most dangerous thing about procrastination is what it quietly does to your self-trust. Every single time you make a promise to yourself and break it, something inside you cracks a little. You stop believing your own words. You stop trusting your own plans. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to see yourself as someone who just cannot follow through. Someone who is fundamentally broken. Someone who will always start and never finish. And that is the real damage, not the unfinished project, not the exam you did not study for, not the business idea you never launched. The real damage is the slow, invisible erosion of the relationship you have with yourself. Now, if any of this sounds familiar, I need you to understand something very clearly before we go any further. You are not lazy. I know the world loves that word. I know your parents might have used it. I know your teachers might have written it on your report cards. I know you have probably whispered it to yourself 1,000 times in the mirror. But laziness is not your problem. It never was. The real problem is far more complex, far more hidden, and honestly, far more fixable than simple laziness. Your brain is not avoiding work because it does not care. Your brain is avoiding work because it is terrified. Terrified of discomfort, terrified of failure, terrified of starting something and discovering that maybe you are not as smart, as talented, or as capable as you hoped you were. So instead of facing that fear, your mind does something incredibly clever. It distracts you. It hands you the phone. It opens social media. It convinces you that reorganizing your desk drawer is somehow urgent. It whispers that you will feel more motivated after lunch, after the weekend, after the new year. And for a few minutes, it works. The anxiety fades. The pressure lifts. You feel okay. But then the guilt hits. And this time, it hits harder than before because deep down, You know you are running. You know you are hiding. And you know that every day you keep running, the gap between where you are and where you want to be gets wider. This is the procrastination cycle, and it does not just waste your time. It slowly, quietly, relentlessly turns extraordinary people into average ones. So what do? More motivation? Another productivity hack? A new planner? A new app? Let me be honest with you. If motivation alone could fix procrastination, you would have fixed it years ago. You have watched the videos. You have read the articles. You have downloaded the apps. And yet here you are, still stuck in the same loop. That is because motivation is the wrong tool for this problem. What you actually need is not more inspiration. What you need is brain rewiring. That is exactly what this 7-day plan is designed to do. This is not a list of productivity tricks. This is not some surface-level advice about waking up earlier or making better to-do lists. Each day targets a specific hidden mental trap that is keeping you stuck. Each day gives you a psychological insight, something that explains why your brain behaves the way it does, followed by one small practical action step, small on purpose. Because transformation does not start with massive, dramatic overhauls. Transformation starts with tiny wins, with moments so small your brain does not even resist them. And those tiny wins stack up day after day until one morning you wake up and realize that you are no longer the person who just talks about change. You are the person who actually does it. If you follow the next 7 days with honesty, with patience, and with even a small amount of courage, the habit of postponing will begin to loosen its grip. Your focus will sharpen, your confidence will rebuild, and most importantly, you will start trusting yourself again. Not because some motivational speaker told you to believe in yourself, but because you will have proof, real, undeniable proof that you can take action even when it is hard. So let us begin. Day 1. A lot of people believe that the reason they cannot get things done is because they lack discipline. They look at productive people, the ones who seem to crush their goals effortlessly, and they think there must be some fundamental character trait they are missing, some inner strength, some genetic advantage, some willpower muscle that other people were born with and they simply were not. But most of the time, that is not what is happening at all. The real reason you cannot start your work is not because you are undisciplined. It is because your brain is completely, utterly, overwhelmingly overloaded. From the outside, it might look like you are wasting time. Scrolling through your phone, watching random videos, lying on the couch doing absolutely nothing productive. But inside your mind, a hurricane is spinning. 100 different thoughts are colliding with each other at full speed. That unfinished assignment from last week. That email you still have not replied to. That awkward conversation you have been avoiding. Your career confusion. Your financial stress, your health guilt, that thing your mom said 3 days ago that is still sitting in your chest, your student loans, your relationship tension, your deadline that is creeping closer every hour. Your brain is trying to process all of it simultaneously, and it is failing, not because it is weak, but because it was never designed to hold this many open loops at once. Think of it this way. Imagine you open 40 browser tabs on your laptop. Then you launch a video editing software on top of that. Then you start downloading a massive file in the background. What happens? The system slows to a crawl. Everything starts lagging. Simple tasks take forever, and eventually the whole thing might just freeze or crash. That is exactly what is happening inside your head. Every single pending task, every unresolved worry, every vague anxiety about the future is sitting in your brain like an invisible tab running in the background. You might not be actively thinking about it, but your mind is still consuming mental energy to keep track of it. This is called cognitive load. And when cognitive load exceeds your brain's processing capacity, even the smallest, simplest task starts to feel like climbing a mountain. This is why sometimes you have an entire free day, nothing on your schedule, no meetings, no obligations, and yet by the evening you feel completely mentally exhausted. You did not do any physical work. You did not solve any major problem. But your brain burned through its energy just by carrying the invisible weight of everything that is unresolved. And here is what makes this truly dangerous. When your mind is overloaded, even tiny tasks start to feel enormous. Replying to a simple text message feels like a chore. Opening a textbook feels unbearable. Starting a workout feels impossible. And so, you postpone. Not because the task is hard, but because your brain literally does not have the bandwidth to initiate it. At this point, procrastination is no longer a habit. It becomes a survival mechanism. Your brain is not being lazy. It is protecting itself from complete shutdown. It is choosing to avoid difficult things because it is already running on fumes. So here is the most important realization of day one. The first step to beating procrastination is not about doing more. It is about thinking less. Before you can be productive, you need to reduce the mental pressure that is crushing your ability to even start. And there is a beautifully simple exercise that does exactly this. It is called a brain dump. You do not need to be organized for this. You do not need a fancy journal or a productivity app. You just need a blank piece of paper and a pen. Or open a blank document on your computer, whatever works. And then you start writing everything, every single thing that is floating around in your mind. Write down your pending tasks. Write down your worries. Write down your random ideas. Write down the calls you need to make, the people you need to text back, the goals you have been thinking about, the fears you have been avoiding, the confusion you have been carrying. Write it all. No order, no structure, no priority system. Just dump it. Get the mental garbage out of your head and onto the paper. It will feel strange at first, maybe even pointless. But as the words start flowing out of your mind and onto the page, something shifts. You will feel your shoulders relax a little. Your chest will loosen. Your breathing will slow. Because your brain is finally releasing the tension of holding everything inside. Here is why this works on a neurological level. Your brain experiences the most stress not from actual problems, but from uncertainty. When tasks and worries exist only inside your mind, they feel enormous. They feel urgent. They feel threatening. But the moment you externalize them, the moment you see them written down in front of you, something changes. They shrink. The monster under the bed turns out to be a pile of laundry. The impossible mountain turns out to be a manageable hill. That is the power of clarity. This is exactly why so many successful people swear by journaling and note-taking. People like Tim Ferriss, Oprah Winfrey, and countless CEOs and athletes have talked about the power of writing things down. They are not just planning their days. They are calming their minds. They are taking the invisible chaos inside their heads and turning it into something visible, concrete, and manageable. And here is another thing you will notice. When everything is just floating around in your head, you feel like you have 100 urgent problems. But when you actually write them all down and look at the list, you will often discover that the real problem was never the quantity of tasks. The real problem was the lack of clarity. Your brain does not panic because you have too much to do. It panics because it cannot clearly see what needs to be done. Unclear things feel threatening. Clear things feel approachable. Now, here is where most people make a critical mistake. They look at their brain dump list, they feel a rush of excitement, and they think, great, starting tomorrow, I am going to tackle everything. They try to change 10 things at once. They set 15 goals. They rewrite their entire daily routine. And for about 48 hours, it feels amazing. They feel like a new person. But then reality hits. Energy dips. Life gets complicated. And within a few days, they are right back where they started, feeling even worse than before because now they have failed at yet another fresh start. This is why the most important rule of day one is this. From your entire brain dump list, you're going to choose only one task, just one. The single most impactful thing you can do right now. Not the easiest, not the most fun, the one that, if you completed it, would make the biggest difference in your life. When you focus on a single target, something remarkable happens in your brain. Resistance drops dramatically. Your mind looks at one clear task and thinks, okay, this is manageable. This is not dangerous. I can handle this. But when you tell yourself that you need to go to the gym, study for 3 hours, wake up at 5, eat healthy, meditate, journal, read, and quit social media all starting tomorrow, your brain goes into full panic mode. It sees an army of demands marching toward it, and it does the only thing it knows how to do. It shuts down. It runs. It procrastinates. Simplicity is the real engine of consistency, not willpower, not motivation, simplicity. Now, there is something else you need to understand on day one, and this one might change the way you approach your entire life. Every person has a natural energy rhythm. Some people are sharp and focused in the morning. Their brains light up at 6 a.m. like a sports car engine. Ideas flow. Concentration locks in. Everything clicks. But by 8 p.m., they are mentally done. Other people are the exact opposite. Mornings feel like wading through thick fog. Their brains do not fully come online until the afternoon or even late at night. And when the clock hits 10 p.m., suddenly their creativity explodes. Focus sharpens. Thoughts become clear. Neither pattern is better or worse. They are just different. But here is the problem. Most people have been taught that there is one correct way to be productive. Wake up at 5 a.m. Do deep work first thing in the morning. Follow the routines of billionaires and Navy SEALs. And so they force themselves into schedules that go directly against their natural biology. Then, when it does not work, they blame themselves. They call themselves lazy. They think something is wrong with them, but nothing is wrong. They are just fighting their own brain instead of working with it. Imagine someone whose mind is naturally slow in the morning, but becomes creative and sharp late at night. If that person forces themselves to do deep, focused work at 5 a.m., their brain will resist every single second of it, not because of laziness, because of biology. On the other hand, if someone is naturally energetic in the early hours and they keep pushing their most important work to late night. Their focus will be scattered and weak. So the second lesson of day one is this: conduct an energy audit. For the next 24 hours, simply observe yourself. Do not try to change anything. Just notice. At what time does your mind feel the freshest? When does concentration come easily? When do you feel naturally motivated to work without forcing it? And when does your brain start craving distractions, scrolling, videos, snacks, anything to avoid effort? Once you understand your natural energy pattern, something powerful shifts. Work stops feeling like punishment, because you are no longer fighting against your own biology. You are working with it. You are placing your most important task in the window where your brain is most willing to cooperate. This is not about working harder. This is about working smarter. True discipline is not about torturing yourself into submission. True discipline is about doing the right work at the right time. Now put these two things together and imagine the result. You have one clear, important task, and you are doing it during your peak energy window. What happens? Your brain offers less resistance. Starting feels natural instead of forced, and when you complete that one task, something beautiful happens inside you. A spark of confidence ignites, not the fake confidence that comes from watching a motivational video. Real confidence, the kind that comes from keeping a promise you made to yourself. And that confidence becomes the fuel for the next action, and the next, and the one after that. Most people spend their lives searching for motivation, but here is a truth that very few people understand. Motivation does not come before action. Motivation comes after action. When you take a small step, when you keep a tiny promise to yourself, your brain begins to build trust. It starts to believe that you are someone who follows through. But every time you make a promise and break it, that trust erodes a little more. And over time, you stop believing in yourself entirely. The entire purpose of day one is beautifully simple. Move your mind from chaos to clarity, because a confused mind can never be a consistent mind. If your brain is cluttered with 100 unresolved thoughts, even the most exciting goals will feel heavy and overwhelming. But if you bring clarity, if you write it all down, choose one thing and align it with your natural energy, the same tasks that felt impossible suddenly become manageable. So today, do not try to transform yourself. Do not try to become a new person overnight. Just understand yourself. Dump every pending thought onto paper. Choose the one task that truly matters, and decide to do it during the time when your energy is naturally at its strongest. That one small step will send a signal to your brain, a signal that says life is no longer running on random mode, a signal that says control is slowly, steadily coming back into your hands. And that signal, as small as it seems right now, is the beginning of everything. Day 2 plus day 3. Day 2. There is something most people never admit out loud, but almost everyone feels. It is the reason talented people stay invisible. It is the reason brilliant ideas stay locked inside notebooks. It is the reason you have probably started and stopped the same goal more times than you can count. And it is not laziness. It is not a lack of ambition. It is not even a lack of time. It is fear, but not the kind of fear you might expect. Most people think they are afraid of failure, and sure, failure is uncomfortable. Nobody enjoys falling flat on their face. But if you dig a little deeper, if you really sit with yourself and examine what is actually holding you back, you will discover something far more unsettling. You are not afraid of failing. You are afraid of being seen failing. You are afraid of looking incompetent, of looking foolish, of putting something out into the world and having people judge it, critique it, or worse, ignore it entirely. The fear is not about the result. The fear is about what the result might say about you as a person, and this distinction changes everything. Think about it. If you were guaranteed that nobody would ever see your work, that nobody would ever know whether you succeeded or failed, would starting feel easier? For most people, the answer is yes, because it was never the work itself that scared them. It was the exposure, the vulnerability, the risk of being perceived as less than perfect. This is where perfectionism enters the picture, and perfectionism might be the most misunderstood trait in human psychology. From the outside, it looks admirable. It looks like someone who has high standards, someone who cares deeply about quality, someone who refuses to settle for anything less than excellence. But underneath that polished surface, perfectionism is almost always fear wearing a mask. Think about someone you know, maybe even yourself, who spends weeks planning but never starts executing, who researches endlessly but never takes the first step, who rewrites the same paragraph 17 times but never publishes the article, who waits for the perfect moment, the perfect mood, the perfect conditions before beginning. That is not high standards. That is avoidance dressed up in a suit and tie. Your brain has a strange pattern when it comes to important tasks. The moment something meaningful appears on your radar, your mind immediately fast forwards to the worst possible outcome. If you have a presentation coming up, your brain does not think about the content. It thinks about the audience judging you. If you need to study for an exam, your brain does not focus on the material. It whispers that you probably will not understand it anyway. If you want to start a new project, a side business, a creative endeavor, a YouTube channel, your mind does not get excited about the possibilities. It warns you that if the result is not perfect, people will laugh. People will think you are a fraud. People will see the real you, the messy, imperfect, uncertain you, and they will walk away. This overthinking paralyzes action. It creates an invisible wall between you and the things you want to do. And the worst part is that it feels rational. It feels like you are just being realistic, just being careful, just being smart about when and how you start. But in reality, you are just scared. And every day you wait for perfection is another day your confidence quietly bleeds out. Here is an analogy that might reframe everything for you. Imagine someone who wants to learn how to swim. They stand at the edge of the pool, staring at the water. They read books about swimming techniques. They watch YouTube tutorials. They buy the perfect swimsuit, the perfect goggles, the perfect swimming cap, but they refuse to get into the water until someone can guarantee them that they will never, ever struggle, that they will never swallow water, that they will never look awkward flailing around in the shallow end. Will that person ever learn to swim? Absolutely not, because every single skill on this planet is messy at the beginning. Every expert was once a terrible beginner. Every masterpiece started as a rough draft. Every gold medalist once stumbled through their first clumsy practice session. The beginning is supposed to be ugly. It is supposed to be uncomfortable. It is supposed to feel wrong. But our ego does not want to accept that. Our ego wants to skip the messy middle and jump straight to the polished result. And when it realizes that is impossible, it chooses the only option that protects its image. It chooses to not start at all. Because if you never try, you can never fail. And if you never fail, your illusion of potential stays perfectly intact. You can keep telling yourself that you could be great if only you started. But you never have to face the terrifying possibility that maybe greatness requires more struggle than you bargained for. This is why today's most powerful rule is what I call the ugly first draft principle. Give yourself permission to be bad. Seriously, not mediocre, not slightly below average, genuinely, unapologetically, embarrassingly bad. If you need to write something, write the worst version you can imagine. Misspellings, awkward sentences, terrible structure, all of it. If you need to study, read slowly, understand nothing. Stare at the same page for 10 minutes, that is fine. If you want to create content, make the most awkward, cringe-worthy video you have ever seen. Let your voice crack. Let the lighting be terrible. Let the editing be non-existent. Because the goal right now is not to create a masterpiece. The goal is to shatter the resistance, to break through the invisible wall that your perfectionism has built between you and action. And once that wall cracks, even a little, everything changes. Here is the brain science behind this. Your mind is not actually afraid of the task itself. It is afraid of the initiation. The moment right before you start is where all the fear concentrates. The task looks like a mountain from the bottom. But the moment you take the first step, the moment your hands start moving, the moment words start appearing on the screen or your feet start hitting the pavement, something shifts inside your brain. The fear begins to dissolve, not all at once, but enough. Enough to keep going, enough to take the next step and the step after that. This is a psychological phenomenon that most people completely miss. They sit around waiting for motivation to appear. They think that one day they will wake up feeling inspired, energized, and ready to conquer the world. And on that magical day, they will finally start. But brain science tells a very different story. Motivation does not create action. Action creates motivation. As long as you are sitting still, your mind will keep manufacturing excuses. It will tell you that the timing is not right, that you need more preparation, that you will feel better after lunch, after the weekend, after the holidays. But the moment you start moving, even reluctantly, even poorly, even just for a few minutes, your brain shifts into a new state. Momentum builds, resistance fades, and suddenly, the thing that felt impossible 5 minutes ago starts to feel almost manageable. This is why your only assignment today is 10 minutes. That is it. Not an hour. Not a full study session. Not a complete project. Just 10 minutes of focused effort on the one task you identified yesterday. Set a timer on your phone. Close everything else. And give that task 10 minutes of your attention. Here is what will happen. The first 2 or 3 minutes will feel brutal. Your brain will fight you. It will beg you to check your phone. It will suddenly remember 100 other things that seem urgent. It will create phantom itches, random hunger, mysterious sleepiness. Your mind will throw every distraction it has at you because it is trying to protect you from discomfort. But if you survive those first few minutes, If you push through that initial friction, something beautiful happens. Your focus starts to click into place, the task starts to feel less threatening, and very often, people who sit down for just 10 minutes end up working for an hour or more because the hardest part was never to work. The hardest part was starting. Picture a college student in Chicago who has been avoiding a research paper for 2 weeks. The assignment feels massive, overwhelming. Every time she thinks about it, her chest tightens. But one evening, she tells herself, just 10 minutes. Just open the document and write one paragraph. And she does. The paragraph is terrible. The sentences are clunky. The argument makes no sense. But something shifts. The fear loosens its grip just a fraction. She writes another paragraph, then another. 45 minutes later, she has a rough draft. Not a good one, but a real one. Something that exists outside her head for the first time. And for the first time in 2 weeks, the weight on her shoulders feels a little lighter. That is the power of the ugly first draft. That is the power of 10 minutes. Today, you are not going to worry about quality. You are not going to judge your output. You are not going to evaluate whether what you produced is good enough. Because in the beginning, judgment is the enemy of progress. When you critique yourself while you are creating, your focus fractures. You cannot be in creation mode and evaluation mode at the same time. So today, you create. Improvement comes later. Polish comes later. Right now, all that matters is movement. Every expert you admire was once terrible at what they do. The difference between them and the millions of people who gave up is simple. They tolerated their bad early attempts. They let themselves be awkward. They let themselves be imperfect. They kept showing up even when the results were embarrassing. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, they got better. Most people quit at the exact moment they feel uncomfortable. That is why the world is full of average, not because people lack talent, but because they lack the tolerance for the messy, ugly, uncomfortable beginning that every worthwhile journey requires. Today's goal is not productivity. Today's goal is proof. Proof that you can take action regardless of whether your mood is perfect, your confidence is high, or your conditions are ideal. Because the people who change their lives are not the ones who wait for the perfect day. They are the ones who keep taking small, imperfect actions on the hard days, the low confidence days, the I do not feel like it days. Those are the days that build the kind of mental toughness that no motivational video can give you. So set your timer, 10 minutes. No judgment, no expectations, just movement. Because a person who stays still will always be defeated by their own thoughts. But a person who starts moving, even slowly, even badly, gradually learns to take control of their own mind. And one more thing before we move on. Your future will not be defined by that one perfect day when everything aligns and the stars cooperate and you feel like a superhero. Your future will be defined by the ordinary, unglamorous days when you showed up anyway. Remember that. Day 3. Have you ever had a day where you were busy from morning until night, constantly doing things, constantly moving, and yet when your head hit the pillow, you felt a strange emptiness, a nagging feeling that despite all that activity, you did not actually accomplish anything meaningful? You cleaned your apartment. You organized your email inbox. You rearranged files on your computer. You spent an hour researching the best productivity app. You watched 3 videos about how to be more focused. You updated your to-do list with color-coded categories, and neat little checkboxes. And yet, the one thing that could actually move your life forward, the one task that truly mattered, sat untouched. Again, welcome to one of the sneakiest traps your brain has ever designed. This is called productive procrastination, and it might be the most dangerous form of avoidance because it does not look like avoidance at all. It looks like hard work. It looks like progress. It feels like you are being responsible, and that is exactly why it is so devastating. Your brain is remarkably clever. It does not like uncomfortable tasks. Deep work, creative projects, difficult conversations, challenging study sessions, anything that requires sustained mental effort triggers a stress response in your mind. Your brain wants to avoid that discomfort, but it also knows that lying on the couch scrolling through social media will make you feel guilty. So it finds a middle ground. It gives you busy work. Tasks that feel productive enough to avoid guilt, but easy enough to avoid real discomfort. Cleaning your desk instead of writing your business plan. Organizing your notes instead of actually studying them. Researching gym routines instead of going to the gym. Planning your diet instead of cooking a healthy meal. You convince yourself that these tasks are necessary, that you are preparing, that you are getting ready. But deep down, if you are honest with yourself, you know the truth. You are hiding. You are hiding behind the illusion of productivity to avoid the one thing that actually scares you. Think about a graduate student in Boston who has a dissertation chapter due in 2 weeks. Instead of writing, she spends 3 hours reorganizing her reference library. She color codes her notes. She downloads a new citation management software. She watches a lecture on academic writing techniques. At the end of the day, she feels like she worked hard. But the chapter has 0 new words. She has not moved 1 inch closer to her goal. And yet, because she was technically busy, the guilt hit softer than it would have if she had just watched Netflix all day. That reduced guilt is exactly what makes productive procrastination so addictive and so dangerous. Here is the critical insight. The problem is not that you are not working hard enough. The problem is that your effort is pointed in the wrong direction. Imagine rowing a boat with all your strength, every muscle burning, sweat pouring down your face. But you are rowing in circles. You will exhaust yourself, but you will never reach the shore. That is what misaligned effort feels like, and it is one of the most frustrating experiences a human being can have. Working hard and going nowhere. This is why some people are busy every single day of their lives and still feel stuck. Not because they are lazy, not because they lack dedication, but because their energy is being spent on things that do not actually matter. The to-do list is full of check marks, but the important goals remain untouched. The calendar is packed, but the needle has not moved. Now, here is where most people make another mistake. They think the solution is more motivation. If they could just feel more inspired, more energized, more pumped up, they would finally tackle the hard stuff. But motivation is one of the most unreliable forces in human psychology. It comes and goes, like weather. Some days you feel like you could run through a brick wall. Other days you cannot even run a bath. If your entire system of getting things done depends on whether you feel like it, you are building your life on quicksand. The people who consistently produce results are not more motivated than you. They have stronger systems. They design their environment so that starting the important work is easy and getting distracted is hard. This is the friction game, and once you understand it, everything changes. Friction is any small obstacle between you and an action. It sounds insignificant, but your brain treats friction like a wall. If your textbook is buried in a bag inside your closet, the mental friction of retrieving it is enough to make your brain say, maybe later. If your laptop is closed and needs to boot up, that 30-second wait gives your mind just enough time to suggest, let us check the phone instead. If your running shoes are in the back of the closet, if your gym clothes need to be found and ironed, if your desk is covered in clutter, each of these tiny obstacles gives your brain an excuse to choose the easier path. And your brain will always choose the easier path. Always. Not because it is weak, because it is efficient. Your brain evolved to conserve energy, not waste it. Every unnecessary step, every small barrier, every tiny inconvenience is a signal to your mind that says, this action requires extra effort. And extra effort means extra resistance. And extra resistance means procrastination. So here is today's lesson. Stop relying on motivation. Start engineering your environment so that discipline becomes almost unnecessary. Because sometimes the problem is not that you are weak. Sometimes the problem is that your setup is weak. A simple example. Let us say you want to go for a run every morning. If your running shoes are tucked away in a box in the back of your closet, if your workout clothes are somewhere in the laundry pile, if your alarm clock is across the room and you have to stumble around in the dark to find everything, what do you think will happen at 6 a.m.? Your brain will immediately generate a dozen reasons to stay in bed. The friction is too high. The path from bed to run is too complicated. But what if, the night before, you set your running shoes right next to your bed? What if your clothes are already laid out? What if your water bottle is filled and sitting on a kitchen counter? Suddenly, the path from bed to run is almost frictionless. And when the alarm goes off, your brain looks at the situation and thinks, well, everything is right here. I might as well just do it. That tiny difference in setup can be the difference between someone who runs 5 times a week and someone who has not run in 5 months. Here is another example. A freelance designer in London keeps procrastinating on client work. Every evening she tells herself she will start first thing in the morning, but every morning she opens her laptop, sees a cluttered desktop, cannot find the project file, gets distracted by emails while searching, and before she knows it, 2 hours have vanished. But one night, she tries something different. She opens the project file before she goes to bed. She closes every other tab. She puts her phone in another room. She places a sticky note on her laptop that says, "Start here." The next morning, when she opens her laptop, the work is staring right at her. No searching, no setup, no friction, and she starts working within 3 minutes. Not because she suddenly became more disciplined, but because she removed every obstacle between herself and the task. This is what smart discipline looks like. It is not about gritting your teeth and forcing yourself through pain. It is about being clever enough to design your environment so that the right behavior becomes the default behavior. So here is your action step for today. Whatever your most important task is for tomorrow, prepare everything for it tonight. If you need to study, put the textbook open on your desk before you go to bed. If you need to write, open a blank document and leave it on your screen. If you need to work out, lay out your gym clothes on the chair next to your bed. If you need to make a difficult phone call, put the number on your home screen so it is the first thing you see. The goal is simple. Minimize the distance between you and action, because your morning brain, the lazy, groggy, excuse-making version of you that wakes up tomorrow, will always look for reasons to delay. It will say, "I do not feel like it. Maybe after coffee. Let me just check one thing first." But if the path is already clear, if everything is set up and ready, if all you have to do is sit down and begin, the excuses lose their power. Your brain has nowhere to run. And do not just make the right action easy. Make the wrong action hard. If your phone is your biggest distraction, put it in a different room. If social media steals your focus, log out of every app so that getting back in requires effort. If snacking derails your work sessions, do not keep junk food on your desk. Because willpower is a limited resource. Every time you have to resist a temptation, you burn through a little more of it, and by the end of the day, you are running on empty. Your brain is like water. It always flows in the direction of least resistance. If distractions are easy and work is hard, your attention will pour toward distraction every single time. But if you flip the equation, if you make productive work the easiest available option and distractions the hardest, your brain will gradually begin to follow the new current. Too many people blame themselves for not being consistent. They think there is something fundamentally wrong with their character. But often, the problem is not who they are. It is how their world is set up. Change the environment, and the behavior follows. Quietly, automatically, without requiring superhuman willpower. One more thing that is crucial to understand. Human beings have a chronic tendency to overestimate their future selves. You genuinely believe that tomorrow's version of you will be more disciplined, more focused, and more motivated than today's version. So you push things off. You say, "I will handle it later. I will feel better tomorrow. Future me will be stronger." But that is a lie your brain tells you to justify present comfort. Tomorrow, the same person will wake up with the same limited energy, the same distractible mind, the same craving for comfort. The only difference is that tomorrow's you will also carry the extra weight of today's unfinished business. Smart people do not trust their future selves. They set things up today so that tomorrow requires as little decision-making as possible. They remove obstacles tonight so that tomorrow morning the only thing left to do is begin. Because at the end of the day, the person who wins is the one who understands their brain's weaknesses and builds systems against them. The person who relies on motivation alone will shine for a few days and then fade. But the person who masters the game of friction will find that consistency slowly, quietly becomes their natural state. Day 4 plus day 5. Day 4. Let me ask you something that might sound strange at first. When was the last time you were truly bored? Not the kind of bored where you scroll through your phone and complain that there is nothing good to watch. I mean genuinely, deeply, uncomfortably bored. Sitting in silence with absolutely nothing to entertain you. No music, no podcast, no notifications, no background noise of any kind. Just you, alone, with your own thoughts. If you cannot remember, you are not alone. And that is exactly the problem. The modern human is more connected than any generation in history. We carry the entire internet in our pockets. We have instant access to millions of songs, billions of videos, endless feeds of content tailored specifically to our preferences. And yet, despite all this connection, something feels deeply off. We are more restless than ever, more distracted than ever, more unable to sit still with ourselves than ever before. A few seconds of silence feels unbearable. Standing in an elevator without looking at your phone feels awkward. Eating a meal without a screen in front of you feels incomplete. Lying in bed without scrolling feels like wasted time. We have trained ourselves to fill every single gap, every tiny pocket of emptiness, with stimulation. And in doing so, we have quietly destroyed one of the most valuable abilities a human being can possess: the ability to focus. Here is what happened to your brain without you even noticing. Every time you scroll through short videos, every time you jump from one notification to another, every time you refresh your feed looking for something new, your brain receives a small hit of dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical that makes you feel excitement, pleasure, anticipation. It is not inherently bad. In fact, it is essential for motivation and goal-directed behavior. But there is a catch. Your brain adapts to dopamine levels. The more you get, the more you need to feel the same effect, and the more your brain gets accustomed to fast, colorful, constantly changing stimulation, the less satisfying, slower, deeper, more meaningful activities become. Think about it like sugar. If someone eats heavily sweetened food every single day, triple chocolate cake, candy bars, sugary soda, then one day you hand them a fresh apple, what happens? The apple tastes bland, boring, almost flavorless, not because the apple changed, but because their taste buds have been recalibrated by excess. The baseline shifted, and now normal sweetness does not even register. The exact same thing happens with your attention. When your brain is constantly bathed in digital stimulation, high-speed content, rapid-fire notifications, endless novelty, then sitting down to read a textbook feels like torture. Opening a blank document to write feels impossibly dull. Working on a long-term project that requires patience and sustained effort feels like you are dragging yourself through wet concrete. And you think the problem is discipline. You think you are just not trying hard enough. But the real problem is that your brain has been overstimulated to the point where normal, meaningful work cannot compete with the dopamine circus happening on your phone. This is why a task that used to take you one focused hour now takes an entire day. Your mind keeps breaking away. Every few minutes, your hand reaches for the phone almost involuntarily. You catch yourself opening Instagram or Twitter without even making a conscious decision to do so. Your brain has automated the escape. It has built a neural highway straight from discomfort to distraction, and it travels that highway faster than you can even register what is happening. And here is the scariest part. Most people do not even realize how much their attention has deteriorated. They think this is just how life is now. They think everyone struggles to concentrate. They think focus is some rare talent that only a few gifted people possess. But that is not true. Focus is not a talent. It is a mental state. And like every mental state, it is shaped by your habits and your environment. If you spend every waking moment consuming fast stimulation, your focus will weaken. That is not opinion. That is neuroscience. But the reverse is also true. If you deliberately expose your brain to periods of low stimulation, if you allow yourself to experience boredom without immediately reaching for a screen, your focus will begin to recover. Your attention span will stretch. Your ability to sit with difficult, slow, meaningful work will strengthen, not overnight, but steadily. This brings us to the most counterintuitive lesson of this entire 7-day journey. Boredom is not your enemy. Boredom is the gateway to focus. But the modern world has taught you to fear it, to avoid it at all costs, to treat every moment of mental silence as a problem that needs to be fixed with content. The truth is that creativity, clarity, and deep thinking are all born in silence. Every great idea you have ever had probably came to you in the shower, on a walk, or lying in bed at night. Not while scrolling, not while consuming, but while your brain was quiet enough to actually think. If you fill every second of your day with stimulation, you are never giving your mind the space it needs to connect with itself, to process, to reflect, to generate original thoughts instead of just recycling other people's content. So here is today's small but devastatingly powerful action. It is called a boredom break. Before you start any difficult task today, give yourself 5 minutes of complete, deliberate, uncomfortable boredom. No phone, no music, no scrolling, no chatting, no background noise. Just sit, or stand by a window, or stare at a wall. Whatever feels right. But do nothing. I know how that sounds. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds too simple to be effective. But try it and watch what happens inside your head. The first minute will feel fine, maybe even pleasant, a little break from the chaos. But by minute 2, your brain will start getting restless. You will feel the urge to check something, anything. Your mind will start generating excuses. This is pointless. I should just start working. Let me just quickly look at one thing. That is the dopamine talking. That is your brain demanding its fix. And this is the moment that matters more than any other. If you can tolerate that urge without acting on it, if you can sit in that discomfort for just a few more minutes, something remarkable happens. Your brain calms down. The craving subsides. Your mental noise level drops. And when you then immediately transition to your important task, that task will feel noticeably easier. Not because the task changed, but because your brain is no longer comparing it to the high-speed dopamine rush of digital entertainment. Your baseline has temporarily reset. The gap between stimulation and effort has narrowed, and starting feels less like climbing a mountain and more like walking through a door. This is not theory. This is practical neuroscience. When you deprive your brain of stimulation for even a short period, dopamine levels begin to normalize. And when dopamine normalizes, ordinary activities start to feel rewarding again. The textbook becomes readable. The blank document becomes inviting. The project becomes interesting. Not because you became more disciplined, but because you stopped flooding your brain with artificial excitement before asking it to do real work. Think about this. If you start your morning by scrolling through reels and notifications, you are essentially injecting your brain with high-dose stimulation before the day even begins. And then you wonder why everything afterward feels flat, why work feels boring, why studying feels unbearable. You have already set the bar impossibly high. Your brain experienced peak dopamine before breakfast, and now everything else is a letdown. But what if you reverse the order? What if your morning started with silence instead of screens? What if you gave your brain a chance to wake up naturally, to settle into the day without being immediately hijacked by notifications? The entire texture of your day would shift, not because you changed what you do, but because you changed what your brain expects. Protecting your attention has become a genuine superpower in the modern age, not because attention was always this fragile, but because it has never been under this much assault. Every app on your phone is designed by teams of brilliant engineers whose entire job is to capture and hold your attention for as long as possible. They use variable reward schedules, the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. They use infinite scroll, so there is never a natural stopping point. They use notifications timed to pull you back in the moment your attention starts to wander. You are not fighting your own weakness. You are fighting a multi-billion-dollar industry that has weaponized psychology against you, and the only defense is deliberate disengagement, scheduled boredom, intentional silence, the willingness to sit with nothing and let your brain remember what it feels like to be unstimulated. Today, just 5 minutes. That is all. Before your most difficult task, create a pocket of emptiness. Let the discomfort wash over you. Let your brain fidget and complain and demand entertainment. And then do nothing about it. Just sit with it. You might notice that after those 5 minutes, your mind is calmer. Your focus arrives faster. The task that felt impossible yesterday feels approachable today, because your brain is no longer running at 100 miles an hour looking for the next hit. It has slowed down enough to actually engage with something real. And here is the deeper truth that goes beyond productivity. The person who cannot sit in silence is controlled by their distractions. The person who can sit in silence is free, free to choose where their attention goes, free to engage with what matters, free to think deeply in a world that rewards shallow thinking. That kind of freedom does not come from an app. It does not come from a new phone. It comes from the quiet, uncomfortable, deeply rewarding practice of learning to be bored. Because the strongest person is not the one who is always motivated. The strongest person is the one whose brain can stay calm without constant stimulation. That person slowly, steadily gains control over their attention, and the person who controls their attention controls their life. Day 5. There is a lie you tell yourself almost every day, and you probably do not even realize you are telling it. It sounds innocent, reasonable even. It goes something like this: I will do it later. I will handle it tomorrow. Future me will be in a better mood, have more energy, and feel more ready to tackle this. It feels true in the moment. After all, right now you are tired. Right now your mood is off. Right now the task feels heavy and uninviting. But tomorrow? Tomorrow is wide open. Tomorrow is a blank canvas. Tomorrow you will wake up refreshed, motivated, and unstoppable. At least, that is what your brain wants you to believe. But let me tell you something uncomfortable. Tomorrow is a fantasy. Not because tomorrow will not come, it will. But a version of you that your brain imagines waking up tomorrow is fictional. That future version is not more disciplined, not more energized, not more capable. That future version will wake up with the same limited willpower, the same distractible mind, the same craving for comfort, and on top of all that, the extra weight of everything you postponed today. This is one of the most well-documented quirks of human psychology. We treat our future selves like strangers. Brain imaging studies have shown that when people think about themselves in the future, the neural patterns look remarkably similar to when they think about a completely different person. You literally process future you the same way you process a stranger on the street. And just like you would not feel much guilt about handing a stranger an extra burden, you do not feel much guilt about dumping your responsibilities onto tomorrow's version of yourself. That is why procrastination feels so easy in the moment. You are not avoiding the task. You are transferring it, quietly passing the stress, the pressure, and the difficulty to someone who feels like someone else. But that someone else is you. Same mind, same body, same emotions. And when tomorrow arrives, that person will feel every ounce of the weight you chose not to carry today, plus the added frustration of knowing that this could have been handled yesterday. Now, here is something even more insidious. When a task stays pending, it does not just sit on your to-do list. It takes up mental real estate. It runs in the background of your mind like a program you forgot to close. You might be watching a movie, having dinner with friends, or trying to relax on a Sunday afternoon, but somewhere in the back of your head, a quiet voice is whispering, "You still have not done it. It is still waiting. The deadline is getting closer." This background noise is what psychologists call the Zeigarnik Effect. Your brain fixates on uncompleted tasks far more than completed ones. It keeps poking you, reminding you, creating a low-level anxiety that never fully goes away until the task is done. This is why procrastination does not actually reduce stress. It multiplies it. You think you are giving yourself relief by postponing, but what you are actually doing is extending the duration of your suffering. Every time you break a small promise to yourself, your self-trust weakens. Think of self-trust like a bank account. Every time you say you will do something and you do it, you make a deposit. Confidence grows, self-respect builds. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through. But every time you say you will do something and you do not, you make a withdrawal. And over time, if the withdrawals keep outnumbering the deposits, the account goes bankrupt. You stop believing your own words. You stop making plans because you know you will not keep them. And you start to feel like a person who is fundamentally incapable of change. This is the hidden cost of procrastination that nobody talks about. It is not just about lost time or missed deadlines. It is about the slow, quiet death of your relationship with yourself. So here is today's psychological shift. The next time your brain whispers, "I will do it later," do not just accept it. Pause. Close your eyes for 1 minute and imagine with complete honesty what tomorrow morning will actually feel like. Not the fantasy version, the real version. You wake up. The task is still there. It has not gotten smaller. It has not gotten easier. And now, on top of it, you are carrying the guilt of another broken promise. The irritation of knowing you could have handled it yesterday. The quiet shame of letting yourself down again. Feel that. Do not just think about it intellectually. Actually feel the weight of it. Feel the tightness in your chest. Feel the frustration in your stomach. Feel the disappointment in your own voice when you tell yourself again that it did not get done. That feeling is the truth that your brain tries to hide from you when it offers the sweet illusion of later. Procrastination is a painkiller with a devastating side effect. It numbs the discomfort now, but amplifies it tenfold tomorrow. Your brain always chases short-term comfort. That is its factory setting. It will always prefer rest now over effort now, even if rest now means chaos later. But emotional maturity, the kind that separates people who talk about change from people who actually change, is the ability to feel future consequences before they arrive. To empathize with your future self the way you would empathize with a close friend. Imagine someone you deeply care about, a best friend, a sibling, a partner, and imagine them drowning in stress. If you could do something right now to ease their burden, even something small, would you not do it immediately? Of course you would, because you care about them, because their pain matters to you. Now apply that same logic to yourself. Future you is not a stranger. Future you is the person you love most, or at least the person you should love most. Every unnecessary delay you create today becomes pain that person will have to carry. Every task you postpone becomes a weight on their shoulders. Is that really what you want to do to someone you care about? This is why today's action step is both simple and emotionally powerful. You are going to give your future self a gift. 15 minutes. That is all. Not enough to finish the task. Just enough to lighten the load. 15 minutes of real focused effort on something you have been avoiding. The assignment you keep pushing back. The email you keep drafting in your head but never sending. The project you keep saying you will start next week. The difficult conversation you keep rehearsing but never initiating. You do not have to finish it. You just have to start it. Because when you take even a small action, your brain exhales. The background anxiety drops. The Zeigarnik Effect loosens its grip. You feel a quiet sense of relief, not because the task is done, but because it is no longer an untouched monster. It is something you have engaged with, something you have started to control. A graduate student who has been avoiding his thesis for a month will panic if he looks at the whole project. But if he just opens the document and writes for 15 minutes, the fear cracks. A professional who has been avoiding a difficult conversation with her manager will feel sick every time she thinks about it. But if she just drafts the opening lines, the emotional weight begins to shift. These tiny movements are what change lives, not grand gestures, not dramatic transformations. Tiny, quiet, almost invisible moments where you chose discomfort over avoidance, where you chose to act instead of postpone, where you chose your future self over your present comfort. And here is a harsh truth you need to sit with. The anxiety you feel about the future is almost never caused by the future itself. It is caused by the actions you are avoiding today. The more you delay, the more background stress your brain carries. The more background stress, the more overwhelmed you feel. The more overwhelmed, the more you delay. It is a vicious spiral, and the only way to break it is to move, even a little, even imperfectly, even reluctantly. Today's goal is not about productivity. It is about repairing the relationship between present you and future you. It is about making a small deposit in that self-trust bank account. It is about proving with evidence that you are someone who cares enough about their own future to take action even when it is uncomfortable. Because success is not just a game of skills and intelligence. A massive part of it depends on how honestly you treat your future self. When your brain says later, catch yourself. Imagine your future face. Feel their exhaustion. and then ask yourself, do they really deserve this burden? Then take 15 minutes, just 15, and let those minutes be the beginning of a new kind of relationship with yourself. The kind where you stop running from discomfort and start building something real. Day 6 plus day 7. Day 6. There is a habit that almost every productive person shares, and it has nothing to do with waking up early, drinking green juice, or meditating for an hour every morning. It is far simpler than that, and far more powerful. It is the way they stop working. Most people stop working when they are completely drained, when their brain is fried, when they cannot squeeze out another sentence, another line of code, another idea. They push until the tank is empty, close their laptop with a sigh of exhaustion, and collapse. And in that moment, their brain does something subtle but devastating. It connects the task with pain. It files the experience under the category of things that are hard, draining, and unpleasant. So the next day, when it is time to sit down and start again, the brain remembers, not the productive moments, not the creative breakthroughs, not the satisfaction of making progress. It remembers the exhaustion, the struggle, the emptiness at the end, and it resists. Starting feels heavy. The task feels like a punishment, and the procrastination cycle kicks in all over again. But what if you stopped differently? What if, instead of pushing until you had nothing left, you deliberately stopped while you were still in the flow, while ideas were still coming, while energy was still humming, while the next step was perfectly clear in your mind? It sounds counterintuitive, almost wasteful. Why would you stop when things are going well? Why would you walk away from momentum? Because of a psychological principle that has been hiding in plain sight for nearly a century. It is called the Zeigarnik Effect, and it might be the most underused tool in the fight against procrastination. The Zeigarnik Effect describes a simple but profound observation about how the human brain works. Your mind does not obsess over things that are finished. Once a task is complete, your brain files it away and moves on. But incomplete tasks, those stay active. They loop in the background, they nag at you, they pull your attention back again and again, demanding resolution. Your brain craves closure, and when it does not get it, it keeps the mental file open, running, consuming energy, refusing to let go. Now, most of the time, this feels like a curse. All those unfinished projects haunting you, all those half-written emails sitting in your drafts, all those open loops creating background anxiety. But here's the twist. If you use this tendency strategically, it becomes an unbelievable advantage. Because if your brain naturally wants to return to unfinished things, then all you have to do is make sure you stop your work at the right kind of unfinished. Think about your favorite television series. Think about the last episode that ended on a massive cliffhanger. The hero is in danger. The secret is about to be revealed. The tension is at its peak. And then the screen goes black. What happens in your mind? You cannot stop thinking about it. You immediately want the next episode. You might even lose sleep over it, not because someone forced you to care, but because your brain cannot tolerate the incompleteness. It needs to know what happens next. Now, imagine applying that same principle to your work. Instead of finishing your writing session at the end of a chapter, stop in the middle of a paragraph, in the middle of a thought, at the exact point where you know what comes next, but have not written it yet. Instead of completing your study session when you reach the end of a topic. Stop when you are in the middle of an interesting concept. Write when things are getting clear. Write when your brain is engaged and curious. Instead of coding until the function is complete, stop when the logic is half built and the solution is forming in your mind. What happens? Your brain treats that unfinished work exactly like a cliffhanger. It keeps thinking about it. It stays connected. It generates a quiet pull that makes sitting back down tomorrow feel natural instead of forced. You are not starting from zero. You are not facing a blank page. You are returning to something your mind has been chewing on since you walked away. And that changes everything. This is why some of the greatest writers in history, people like Ernest Hemingway, deliberately stopped their writing sessions in the middle of a sentence, not at the end of a scene, not at the end of a chapter, in the middle of a sentence, because they knew that the next morning they would not have to stare at a blank page wondering where to begin. The beginning was already there. The momentum was already built. The brain was already engaged. One of the biggest reasons procrastination wins is because every restart feels like starting from scratch. You sit down, you stare at your work, and your brain has to spend energy figuring out where you left off, what you were thinking, what the next step should be. That cognitive startup cost is enormous, and your brain hates it. It would rather scroll through social media than face the mental effort of rebuilding context from zero. But when you stop at a strategic point, when the next step is already clear, that startup cost nearly disappears. You sit down, you see exactly where you left off, you know exactly what comes next, and you start writing, studying, building, creating almost immediately. The friction is gone. The resistance is minimal, and the work flows. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. When you are moving, staying in motion feels natural, but when you stop completely, getting started again requires a tremendous amount of energy. Think about pushing a car. The hardest part is always the first push. Getting it to move from a dead stop takes everything you have. But once it is rolling, even slowly, keeping it going requires far less effort. Your work operates the same way. Every time you let momentum die completely, you have to push from zero again. But if you keep a little bit of motion alive, if you leave the work in a state where continuing is easier than starting, you give yourself a massive advantage. Now, here is something that will change the way you think about consistency forever. Most people believe consistency is about willpower, about forcing yourself to show up every single day no matter how you feel. And sure, willpower plays a role. But consistency is also deeply tied to emotional connection. If your brain feels emotionally connected to a task, if it is curious, engaged, invested in the outcome, it naturally wants to return to it. You do not have to drag yourself back. You are pulled back. And the Zeigarnik Effect is one of the most reliable ways to create that emotional pull. Think about the difference between these two scenarios. In the first, you finish everything at the end of your work session. The chapter is done, the assignment is complete, the project is wrapped up. You feel satisfied, accomplished, but the next morning, when a new task is waiting, your brain sees a blank slate. No connection, no curiosity, no pull. Starting feels like effort. In the second scenario, you stop in the middle. Something is unresolved. A question is half answered. An idea is half formed. You feel a slight itch, a gentle restlessness. And when you wake up the next morning, your brain is already thinking about it, already wanting to finish, already leaning toward the work before you even sit down. That is the difference between willpower-driven consistency and curiosity-driven consistency. And curiosity wins almost every time. So today, when you sit down to work, pay attention to your energy. Notice when the focus is strong. Notice when the flow is real. And then, instead of riding it until you crash, stop deliberately. Stop at the interesting part. Stop when the next step is visible. Stop when your brain still wants more. Let yourself feel the slight discomfort of walking away from something unfinished, because that discomfort is not a problem. It is fuel. Fuel for tomorrow. And maybe this idea applies beyond just work. Maybe it applies to life itself. Human beings grow as long as something inside them feels unfinished. As long as there is a question they want to answer, a skill they want to build, a version of themselves they want to become. The moment everything feels complete, the moment there is nothing left to chase, stagnation begins. So do not turn your goals into dead routines. Keep them alive. Keep feeding your brain curiosity. Keep leaving the next chapter unwritten, because staying mentally connected is more powerful than staying motivated. And the person who maintains that connection never finds it truly difficult to come back. Day 7. Here's something that might sting a little, but you need to hear it. You have tried to change before, maybe many times. You have had moments of inspiration, bursts of energy, stretches of discipline that lasted a few days, maybe even a few weeks. You downloaded the apps. You wrote the goals. You set the alarms. And for a while, it felt real. It felt like this time would be different. But then something shifted. The excitement faded. Life got busy. Your mood dipped. A bad day turned into a bad week. And slowly, quietly, without any dramatic moment of failure, you drifted back to the old patterns. The snooze button, the scrolling, the postponing, the guilt. The same cycle you've been trapped in for years. This is not a character flaw. This is human nature. And understanding why it happens is the key to making sure this time actually sticks. The reason temporary change fails is because it is built on the wrong foundation. Most change attempts are powered by emotion. A motivational video gets your heart pumping. A moment of frustration makes you swear you will never waste another day. A New Year countdown fills you with hope. And emotion is a fantastic spark. It can ignite action. It can get you off the couch. But emotion is a terrible fuel for sustained effort, because emotions fluctuate. They are unstable by nature. Some days you feel invincible. Other days you feel like you cannot even get out of bed. If your entire system of self-improvement depends on how you feel on any given morning, you are building a house on sand. The people who actually maintain long-term change do not rely on motivation. They rely on systems, structures that operate independently of mood, frameworks that make the right behavior easier and the wrong behavior harder, regardless of whether they feel inspired or exhausted. And the most powerful system available to any human being is also one of the oldest: social accountability. There is a hidden truth about human psychology that explains almost everything about how we behave. We are social creatures down to our DNA. Our brains are wired to care deeply about what other people think of us, not because we are vain, but because for hundreds of thousands of years, social acceptance was literally a matter of survival. Being rejected by the group meant death. So our brains evolved to prioritize social approval, to avoid embarrassment, to maintain our reputation within our tribe. And you can use this ancient wiring to your advantage. Think about this. How many times have you told yourself you would wake up early only to hit snooze and sleep until noon? Probably dozens. But how many times have you overslept when you had a flight to catch, or a job interview, or a meeting with someone important? Probably never. Why? Because in the first scenario, the only person you are letting down is yourself. And your brain has learned that you will forgive yourself. You always do. But in the second scenario, someone else is involved. Your reputation is on the line. The possibility of embarrassment is real. And suddenly, your brain finds the willpower that was mysteriously absent 5 minutes ago. This is the power of accountability. When a commitment exists only inside your own head, breaking it is easy. There are no consequences, no witnesses, no one to disappoint except you. But the moment you externalize that commitment, the moment you tell another human being exactly what you plan to do and by when, the equation changes completely. Now, there is social pressure. Now there is the risk of looking unreliable. Now your brain's ancient fear of social judgment activates, and it starts taking the commitment seriously. This is why gym partners work. This is why study groups work. This is why professional athletes have coaches, writers have editors, and executives have boards. Not because these people cannot function alone, but because they understand that human beings perform better when someone is watching, when someone is expecting results, when the cost of failure is not just private guilt, but public acknowledgement. But here's the key. Accountability has to be specific. Saying, "I am going to try to be more productive," is meaningless. Your brain will find a loophole in that vague language before the sentence is even finished. But saying, "I am going to finish the first 3 pages of my report by 6 p.m. today, and I will send you a photo of the completed work as proof," that is a commitment your brain cannot easily wiggle out of. The specificity removes ambiguity. The deadline creates urgency, and the proof requirement makes it real. And if you really want to supercharge the effect, add a small consequence. Tell your accountability partner that if you do not deliver on time, you owe them dinner, or $20, or you have to do something mildly embarrassing. The human brain is wired for loss aversion. We feel the pain of losing something roughly twice as strongly as we feel the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. So the threat of losing money, time, or face is often more motivating than the promise of reward. Sometimes the fear of embarrassment is a more powerful engine than all the motivation in the world. Now let me share the second half of today's lesson, and it might be the most important mindset shift of this entire journey. Most people only celebrate outcomes. They wait for the big wins, the job offer, the exam result, the finished project, the number on the scale. And when those big wins arrive, they feel great, temporarily. But the problem is that big outcomes take time. Sometimes weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years. And in the long stretches between those milestone moments, the brain receives no reward, no acknowledgement, no signal that what you are doing matters. And without that signal, motivation evaporates, consistency crumbles, and the old habits creep back in. This is why the second lesson of Day 7 is transformative. Reward the action, not the outcome. Stop waiting to feel good, until you achieve the result. Start feeling good the moment you take the step. Because the truth is, you do not control outcomes. You cannot guarantee that your project will succeed, that your exam will go well, that your business will grow. But you absolutely control your effort. You control whether you sat down and did the work. You control whether you showed up despite not feeling like it. And that, more than any result, is what deserves celebration. Think about two people who start going to the gym. The first person only cares about physical transformation. Every day they step on the scale. Every week they check the mirror. And when the changes are slow, which they always are at the beginning, frustration builds. After a month of effort with minimal visible results, they quit. The second person takes a different approach. Every single day that they show up at the gym, regardless of how the workout went, they acknowledge it. They feel proud, not of the result of the action. They tell themselves, I showed up today. That matters. Who do you think is still going to the gym 6 months from now? The second person, every time. Because their reward is immediate. It is built into the process, not delayed until some distant outcome. And because the brain receives consistent positive reinforcement for the action itself, it starts to associate effort with pleasure instead of pain. Over time, the behavior stops feeling like discipline. It starts feeling like identity. This is the final lock of the entire system, a framework where you are not dependent on willpower alone, where social pressure keeps you accountable, where small actions are celebrated immediately, where consistency does not feel like grinding, but like self-respect. So here is your action step for today. Pick up your phone. Call or message someone you trust, a friend, a sibling, a colleague, a partner. Tell them exactly what you are going to accomplish in the next hour. Be specific. Not I am going to be productive, but I am going to write 800 words of my essay and send you a screenshot by 4 p.m. And if I do not, I owe you lunch. This tiny step will shift something fundamental inside your brain. Suddenly, the distractions on your phone will not look as tempting, because your mind is no longer just thinking about comfort. It is thinking about consequences, about follow-through, about the image you want to project to someone who matters to you. And when you deliver, when you send that screenshot or that message saying done, a different kind of confidence will bloom inside you. Not the shallow confidence that comes from a pep talk. The deep, unshakable confidence that comes from keeping a promise. Remember this. Disciplined people are not born different. They are not made of stronger material. They have simply learned to build systems that guide their behavior when emotion is not enough. They know that the brain, left to its own devices, will sabotage them. So they use environment, accountability, and rewards to stay on track. They understand that excuses are natural, but systems are stronger. And maybe that is the real mark of adulthood. Not when you stop making excuses, but when you start building systems that make excuses irrelevant. When you stop relying on temporary emotions and start constructing a long-term identity. Action by action. Day by day. Promise by promise. This is no longer just a 7-day challenge. You now possess the psychological tools that can reshape your behavior permanently. And the day you learn to control your actions is the day your life begins to change direction. Not someday. Not when conditions are perfect. Right now. Starting with this moment. starting with the very next thing you do after you finish reading this. So here you are, 7 days later. And if you have followed along honestly, something has already shifted. Maybe it is subtle. Maybe you cannot quite put your finger on it yet. But something inside your mind feels different. The weight is a little lighter. The fog is a little thinner. The voice in your head that used to whisper, "You will never change," has gotten just a fraction quieter. And that matters more than you realize, because the biggest transformation of these 7 days was never about your to-do list. It was never about how many tasks you completed or how many hours you worked. The biggest transformation happened in the way you see yourself, in the way you understand your own brain, in the way you relate to the person you are becoming. Before these 7 days, you probably believed that procrastination was simply laziness, a character flaw, a weakness that some people are cursed with and others are lucky enough to avoid. You looked at productive people and assumed they had something you did not, some secret ingredient, some invisible strength, some genetic lottery ticket that gave them discipline while you got stuck with excuses. But now you know the truth. And the truth is far more nuanced, far more human, and far more hopeful than the laziness narrative ever was. Procrastination is not about being weak. It is about a brain that is trying to protect you from discomfort. It is about dopamine systems that have been hijacked by a world designed to keep you distracted. It is about fear masquerading as perfectionism, about mental overload disguised as laziness, about a nervous system that was built for a simpler time being forced to navigate the most overstimulating environment in human history. You are not broken. You never were. Your brain was just responding to pressures you did not fully understand. And now that you understand them, you have the power to respond differently. Let me walk you through what you have actually learned, not as a summary of techniques, but as a map of the internal journey you have taken. On day 1, you discovered that the first enemy is not laziness, but mental overload. Your brain was drowning in unresolved thoughts, carrying dozens of invisible tabs that consumed your energy before you even started your day. You learned that clarity is the prerequisite for action, that you cannot focus when your mind is cluttered with 100 competing demands. And you learned the power of the brain dump, the beautifully simple act of getting everything out of your head and onto paper, not to organize it perfectly, just to see it. Because the moment your worries become visible, they shrink. The monster under the bed turns into something you can actually handle. You also learned something that most people never figure out in their entire lives, that your energy has a rhythm, a natural pattern of peaks and valleys that is unique to you, and that fighting this rhythm is one of the most common reasons people fail at consistency. You stop trying to be a morning person if you are not one. You stop forcing deep work at times when your brain is begging for rest. You started working with your biology instead of against it. And that single shift made everything feel less like punishment and more like partnership. On day 2, you confronted the invisible saboteur that lives inside every ambitious person, perfectionism. You realized that what you always thought was a high standard was actually a sophisticated form of fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being seen as imperfect. Fear of putting something real into the world and having it fall short of the impossible standard you set for yourself. You understood that this fear keeps millions of talented, intelligent, capable people permanently stuck in the planning phase, forever researching, forever preparing, forever waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives. And you learned the antidote, the ugly first draft, the radical, ego-bruising, liberating decision to create something terrible on purpose, to write badly, to study clumsily, to start awkwardly, because the goal was never perfection. The goal was breaking through the resistance, and you discovered, maybe for the first time, that starting is the hardest part, that the mountain only looks impossible from the bottom, that the moment you begin moving, the fear starts to dissolve, and what felt impossible starts feeling merely difficult. And difficult is something you can handle. You also learn something that contradicts almost everything popular culture tells you about motivation. You learned that motivation does not come before action. It comes after. That waiting to feel inspired is a trap. That the people who accomplish extraordinary things are not the ones who felt ready. They are the ones who started before they were ready and let the momentum carry them forward. On day 3, you uncovered one of the sneakiest traps your brain has ever designed: productive procrastination, the art of staying busy while avoiding everything that actually matters. You recognize the pattern: cleaning your desk instead of writing your paper, organizing your files instead of doing your work, watching tutorials instead of practicing. All of it felt productive. All of it reduced guilt just enough to keep you comfortable. But none of it moved you closer to your real goals. You learned that effort without direction is just motion without progress. That rowing harder does not help if you are rowing in circles. And you discovered the game of friction, the idea that your behavior is shaped less by your character and more by your environment. That small obstacles between you and the right action create just enough resistance for your brain to choose the easy path instead. And that by removing those obstacles, by setting up your environment the night before so that tomorrow morning the only thing left to do is begin, you can make discipline almost automatic. You also confronted an uncomfortable truth about willpower, that it is limited, that every time you resist a temptation, you burn through a little more of it, and that the smartest people do not rely on willpower at all. They design their world so that the right behavior is the default and the wrong behavior requires effort. They do not fight distractions. They eliminate them before the battle even begins. On day 4, you went deeper than productivity. You went into the neuroscience of attention itself. You understood why your brain has become addicted to stimulation, why every second of silence feels uncomfortable, why sitting with your own thoughts, something that should be the most natural thing in the world, now feels almost unbearable. You learned about the dopamine trap, how every scroll, every notification, every rapid-fire piece of content recalibrates your brain's reward system, how the constant flood of digital stimulation makes normal, meaningful work feel boring by comparison, how your attention span has been quietly eroding for years without you even noticing. And you learned the cure, not a complicated technique, not a new app, just 5 minutes of deliberate boredom, 5 minutes of sitting in silence before your most important task, letting your brain crave stimulation and then refusing to give it, watching the craving rise and fall like a wave, and discovering on the other side that your focus sharpens, your baseline resets. The task that felt impossible suddenly feels approachable, not because the task changed, but because your brain stopped comparing it to the dopamine fireworks of social media. You understood that protecting your attention is a genuine superpower in the modern world, not because focus was always rare, but because it has never been under this much assault, and that the person who can sit in silence, who can tolerate boredom, who can engage with slow, deep, meaningful work without constantly reaching for their phone, that person has an advantage that no amount of talent or intelligence can replace. On day 5, you had perhaps the most emotional realization of the entire journey. You discovered that you have been treating your future self like a stranger, dumping responsibilities on tomorrow's version of you the way you might dump a heavy bag on someone you do not know. You understood that every time you say, "I will do it later," you are not delaying a task. You are transferring suffering, passing the weight from present comfort to future pain, and you recognized the devastating toll this takes on your self-trust. Every broken promise to yourself is a small withdrawal from the bank account of self-respect. And over time, enough withdrawals lead to bankruptcy, to a person who no longer believes their own words. You learned to pause before postponing, to close your eyes and genuinely imagine what tomorrow's version of you will feel like. The stress, the guilt, the quiet frustration of knowing it could have been different. And you found that this simple act of empathy, caring about your future self the way you would care about a close friend, is enough to tip the balance, to make you choose 15 minutes of discomfort now over hours of regret later. On day 6, you discovered the hidden power of incompleteness. You learned that your brain obsesses over unfinished things far more than finished ones, and that this tendency, which usually feels like a curse, can be turned into your greatest weapon against procrastination. You learned to stop working at strategic points, not when you are exhausted and empty, but when you are still in the flow, when the next step is clear, when your brain is still engaged and curious, because stopping at that point creates a mental cliffhanger, a pull that brings you back tomorrow, a momentum that survives the overnight pause and makes starting again feel natural instead of forced. You understood that consistency is not just about willpower, it is about emotional connection. When your brain feels connected to a task, when it is curious about what comes next, returning to the work is not a struggle. It is a desire. And the Zeigarnik Effect, that beautiful quirk of human psychology, is one of the most reliable ways to maintain that connection. And on day 7, you built the final piece of the system, the external structure that holds everything together. When internal motivation fails, social accountability. You learn that human beings are not designed to operate alone, that our brains are wired to care deeply about social perception, and that this wiring, which usually manifests as anxiety about what people think, can be harnessed as a force for positive change. You told someone what you planned to do. You made your commitment specific, time-bound, and verifiable. You added consequences, and in doing so, you transformed a private intention into a public promise, one that your brain takes seriously, one that it will work harder to keep, not because it suddenly became more disciplined, but because the stakes changed. You also learned the final mindset shift. Reward the action, not the outcome. Stop waiting for the big win to feel proud. Start celebrating the moment you sit down, the moment you begin, the moment you choose effort over comfort, because outcomes are uncertain and delayed, but actions are immediate and within your control. And when you train your brain to associate action with pride, effort with identity, showing up with self-respect, something profound happens. The behavior stops feeling like discipline. It starts feeling like who you are. Now let me be honest with you about something. Knowing all of this is not enough. Understanding the psychology of procrastination does not automatically cure it. You can read every book on swimming and still drown the first time you jump into the ocean. Knowledge without practice is just entertainment. And if you treat these 7 days as just another interesting thing you consumed, just another video you watched, just another article you read and then forgot about, nothing will change. You will go right back to the same patterns, the same scrolling, the same postponing, the same nightly promise that tomorrow will be different. But you have something now that you did not have 7 days ago. You have tools, real, practical, psychologically grounded tools. And more importantly, you have evidence. If you actually did the exercises, if you dumped your brain onto paper, if you set the 10-minute timer, if you sat in boredom for 5 minutes, if you told someone your plan and followed through, then you have proof that you can take action. Not in some ideal future, right now, today, in this messy, imperfect, uncomfortable present moment. And that proof is worth more than 1,000 motivational speeches. Here's what I want you to understand about the road ahead. You will have bad days. Days where the old patterns pull at you. Days where the phone wins. Days where you hit snooze and scroll and postpone and feel that familiar brick of guilt in your stomach. That is going to happen, not because you failed, because you are human, and being human means that progress is never a straight line. It is a zigzag. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. The direction matters more than the speed. What separates the people who eventually break free from procrastination and the people who stay trapped forever is not perfection. It is recovery speed. How quickly you catch yourself. How fast you get back on track. How willing you are to start again after a stumble without turning it into a full collapse. The old, you would have a bad day and spiral into a bad week, then a bad month, then give up entirely. The new you has a bad day, acknowledges it, applies one of the tools you learned, and starts again the next morning. That is the difference, not between a disciplined person and an undisciplined one, but between someone who has a system and someone who does not. You are not the same person who started reading this 7 days ago. Not because your circumstances changed. Your job is the same. Your responsibilities are the same. Your challenges are the same. But you are different. You understand things about your own brain that most people never learn. You know why you avoid hard things. You know how to lower the resistance. You know how to use your environment, your psychology, your social connections as tools instead of obstacles. And you know, with absolute certainty, that you are capable of taking action even when every fiber of your being wants to run. That knowledge is not going back in the box. It is part of you now. So here is my final challenge to you, not for today, for the rest of your life. Every single morning before you pick up your phone, before you check your notifications, Before you let the world rush in and hijack your attention, take 30 seconds, just 30. Close your eyes, take a breath, and ask yourself one question. What is the one thing I can do today that my future self will thank me for? Not 10 things, not a whole routine, just one thing, the most important one, and then do it. Before the excuses arrive, before the mood fades, before the day gets complicated, just do it. Badly if you have to, slowly if you must, imperfectly, always. But do it, because life does not change in a single dramatic moment. There is no montage, no sudden transformation, no magical morning where you wake up and everything is different. Life changes in the quiet, ordinary, unremarkable moments when your brain says run and you choose to stay, when your body says rest and you choose to move, when your ego says wait until it is perfect and you choose to start right now with whatever you have. Those moments are invisible. Nobody applauds them. Nobody posts them on social media. Nobody gives you a trophy for sitting down at your desk when you would rather be anywhere else. But those moments are where your future is being built. Brick by brick, day by day, promise by promise. And the most painful truth of all, the one that should keep you up at night more than any deadline or any failure, is this. Time is not waiting for you. The goals you are ignoring today will not wait patiently until you are ready. They will either become achievements or regrets. And the only thing that determines which one they become is what you do right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Right now. You have spent enough of your life waiting for the perfect version of yourself to show up. That person is not coming. The only person who is ever going to change your life is the imperfect, uncertain, scared, beautifully human version of you that exists in this very moment. And that person is more than enough. So stop waiting. Stop planning to plan. Stop preparing to prepare. Stop watching videos about productivity and start being productive. Stop reading about discipline and start being disciplined. Stop consuming and start creating. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not bridged by information. It is bridged by action. And action, as you now know, does not require motivation. It does not require confidence. It does not require the perfect mood or the perfect morning or the perfect life. It just requires starting, and you already know how to do that, so the decision is yours. You can close this and go back to the same old patterns, the nightly guilt, the morning excuses, the endless cycle of promising and breaking, or you can take what you have learned and use it. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently, one day at a time, one task at a time, one small, imperfect, courageous action at a time. Because at the end of everything, life belongs to the people who refuse to stay comfortable, who refuse to let fear make their decisions, who refuse to hand their future to a version of themselves that does not exist yet. Life belongs to the people who start, and now you are one of them.